Excellent. All right. So you guys are able to see my desktop, is it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. So so our approach is mostly very much like it's going to be in just like in real time. We'll be working completely on Linux, and we have multiple boxes here. I set up something like this. Is what we got. Uh, this one. This is what we're looking at. This is the setup. And the Windows box is what you're looking at. Your my desktop, the one that you're seeing, is this one, Windows 8 box. There's a router here, and we got two servers. One is uh, a Red Hat server, and the other one is Oracle Enterprise Linux 6 server. So we'll be working on these two, and we'll be connecting from your Windows system. So just like you're sitting in office and connecting to servers in your data centers. And this server is accessible outside. So you will be able to access it over the internet. So I'll give you all those details and everything once we are done with today's session. So you can actually work on the same server that we are practicing. So all the settings, everything will be same. All right. And also I'll give you a similar setup, a virtual this box, so that you can put it on your desktop if you are planning on working offline. I'll come back to those details. All right.
Okay.
So that's how the overall structure is going to be, and the content of this session, I think I've already sent it to you guys. Just go through the content once. It covers all the practically required content for a working WebLogic administrator. So we're going to cover we're going to concentrate more on clustering. We're going to concentrate more on extending the domain. Then towards the end of our sessions, we'll be concentrating more on performance tuning, because that's where most of your problems will be there. And if you're attending an interview, that's where most of the questions will land. So our approach is more towards practical implementation and interview orientation rather than theory. And we'll give emphasis on fundamentals, so that you know what you are doing. It's not just how you are doing it, but you should know why you are doing something. So that's really important. So we'll be concentrating on everything. We'll introduce a concept first, and then we'll implement the concept second. Then we will talk about any relevant real-time ways of doing things, or relevant points. All right. So before we go into WebLogic, the first thing is we'll just introduce what in general an application server is. Because there are lots of application servers you will see in the market, WebLogic, and the next best are probably the competing thing is WebSphere. That comes closest to WebLogic. And hold on. Giri, can you put yourself on mute, Giri?
Okay.
There's a slight noise. You can unmute yourself, whenever you want to talk. That's cool. Thank you. Right. So we'll see what application servers are there, along with WebLogic. But even before talking about what application servers, we will see what in general is an application server. Means why was there a need to create something called an application server? Then we will come into how WebLogic is an application server, or what kind of services it provides. So normally the best analogy that you can think of for an application server is more like an operation theater, the one that we usually see in our movies. So where you have patient goes in, most likely in our Bollywood and Indian movies. So you see operation theater wherein another patient rushes in, usually our hero or heroine, and then lots of chaos within that operation theater. So people will be moving around, doctors, there's a lot of equipment, and there are the flashlights with the bed and flashlights on top of it. Then you see a green monitor kind of thing that basically shows your pulse and everything. Then there are oxygen cylinders. Now in this entire chaos, there's one important thing is there is only one surgeon, the main surgeon, who is supposed to perform the operation, or at least who is responsible to perform the operation. Now the rest of the things like the supporting staff or the equipment that we have around the bed, they're all supporting services. Now those supporting services are essential for any kind of operation. That you are getting operated on your brain or you are getting operated on your leg, it doesn't really matter. Your operation theater equipment pretty much remains same. So you require the same oxygen cylinders, you will require the same equipment and everything. And the main person, one person who is responsible to make sure how to use this equipment is the surgeon. Now let's say during the middle of the operation you are needed to put on the oxygen mask. Now if you are needed to put on the oxygen mask, it's not necessary that the main surgeon has to do that. It's required service, means it's required that you need to put on the oxygen mask. Without that the operation cannot complete. But it's not necessary that we have the surgeon has to do it. He can take care of, somebody else can take care of that. But when the oxygen mask has to be put on, that needs to be directed by the surgeon. So here, if you take that analogy, it's more like the surgeon is the developer, a Java developer, who is supposed to write a Java program. That's an operation. Now when you're performing the Java operation or the Java program, when you're writing the Java program, it requires some services always, like connection to the database. Because every Java program fetches data from a database, manipulates that data, puts it back into the database, or presents to the end user who is accessing it. So a Java program normally requires one service, at least for now, called JDBC service. Now that JDBC service is required by every Java program. Nowadays everything, there is no Java program without a database, literally. So what was done here was, this all happened in 1995 around. That's when they came up with the application server concept. Now why do we so obviously every time you are creating a Java program, you also needed to write the code to connect to the database. That's when they came up with the idea. If we need the database connection every time, what's the point of writing it again and again? Means why the surgeon has to put on the oxygen mask? Let somebody else put on the oxygen mask and let the surgeon just tell it that put on oxygen mask. So the surgeon just will redirect. The developer will just tell, I will need a database connection. Let somebody else provide that database connection. So here the database connection will be provided by somebody else called an application server. So the developer is now concentrating more on writing the business logic of the program. Means after you fetch the data, what needs to be done with the data. So the developer will not have to worry about how I should connect to the database, how I should maintain the connection. Let's say the data, the connection terminates in between, then there is another problem. So the connectivity part is left out to somebody called an application server. So application server is like an operation theater here. Now on that application server, you can put on any kind of operation, means any kind of Java program. All the Java programs require some critical services like JDBC. Now all those services are provided by your application server. So in general, if you see, you can define an application server in very loose terms. It's the runtime environment that provides all the critical services. The critical services could be JDBC, they could be GMS, it could be clustering for high availability, it could be security, which will be user groups management, SSL configuration, all that stuff. Then it could be transaction management, let's say if the application is working on multiple resources, then the transaction has to be managed. So your application means the developer concentrates only on the business logic. He does not worry about the commonly required services to run that Java program. And entire runtime is provided by application server. And that's what we are working on. As an administrator, your job is to make sure you have that operation theater ready when the developer puts on the program into the operation theater or into your application server. Now, as an administrator, you create that application server, means you install WebLogic, you create domains. We will see what domains are later. Then you create all the services required to perform that search. Means you will create all the services required by the Java program. So the developer is going to tell you, I need JDBC service, I need GMS service, I need security services. So please create all these services. You will get a requirement. And as an administrator, you create all those services required by the developer. After creating those services, then you server. That's called deployment. So what we have now is you're preparing a runtime environment with all the required services, like you're preparing an operation theater. Then developer is working on the core business logic, which takes care of what to do with the data. Then developer will give you that code. You will put that code onto the application server. So it's called a deployment. So here, if you see, if you run down your PPT a little bit, I'm going to send you this PPT also. So the surgeon is the developer. So the surgeon will know when to when to get the JDBC connection, or when to get the security related thing, or when to get another service. That will be told to a surgeon, and that will be told to an admin, and the admin will create all the appropriate services, and finally the application will be deployed. Once the application is deployed, the application starts using those services. Now if you take an example like ebay.com, now the ebay.com has multiple components in it. If you see, go to the eBay site and see that various components, you will see a search bar, then you will have a shopping cart application, then there is a user login that needs to be managed, which is handled by an LDAP server. Then there is a payment gateway, which gives you access to payment. Basically, you can pay using a lot of methods. Then there is a CRM, means once you have your payment made, then it has to move into the CRM, customer relationship management, that will take care of taking your feedback, tracking your order and everything. Then there is a SMS component that will keep you updated about what is happening with your order, means whether the customer has shipped your order or whether you received it or not, all those things. Now in these, all these services are required more likely by any of, let's say, e-commerce kind of application that if we are developing. Now instead of worrying about, let's say, if the application starts worrying about how to integrate a payment gateway, then the developer really cannot concentrate on the business logic or the presentation of to the end user. Instead, there is somebody else on the background, like your application server, which takes care of providing all these things. The same way, any Java program. Nowadays, any Java program requires a similar kind of services. A very common service that we see is JDBC service. Now, a JDBC service will be taken care, means how to connect to a database, how to handle the connection, what if the connection is terminated. Those things are handled by the application server. The application will not have any code related to how to connect to a database. Application will simply say, I need connection to DB01, let's say. It's the application server that gives that connection. So application server is usually the runtime environment that provides all the critical services to execute your core business logic. That's a very loose definition. It provides lots of services, application server. It's the exact analogy is with your operation theater. Now again, here we have a lot of components you will see when you're working in a project. Application server is somewhere in between It's usually called middleware. The reason it's called middleware is there is a front end, which is a presentation layer. And that's where the end user will access the application. So that's usually the GUI part. That's what we say. The presentation layer, we're not really worried. There is nothing much for a WebLogic administrator in presentation layer. Our job is in business layer, because the request lands onto the application server. That's where it gets executed. In business layer, the code is what is getting executed, and the data is available in the data layer, which is in the background, means your database. So we're looking at a 3-tier architecture. In the diagram you are seeing, I did not give the presentation layer, so the tier 1 will not be there. What you are seeing is a business layer, tier 2. These two columns, what you are seeing, column 1 and column 2, these two, this one and this one are tier 2, and then you have a data layer, tier 3. So you will be working mostly on tier 2 and tier 3. The tier 1, I just taken it out, the presentation layer. Now if you see in these two tiers, it's really important that you understand what are the various components that you come across in these two tiers. So if you see this one, I will list out usually a set of web servers that we are talking about. Then there are a set of app servers like WebLogic, WebSphere, and then there are databases, then there is a operating system, then there is a hardware. So we'll look at what are the various combinations you will come across. Now before we go in there, just now we talked about app server. So we know app server provides all the critical services for a Java program, especially if you are talking about WebLogic. Now compared to app server, you may have also heard about something called a web server. So web server is usually in front of app server, means the request lands on the web server first. Web servers are put on in front of app server so that they can provide responses to the static content. For example, if you have a banking account, let's say online banking application, you usually log into that banking application and then we transfer funds and do all that stuff, or online banking, typical online banking application. Now there, if you go to the bank site, it's not always you go into the banking application. On the side there is a lot of other content, static content. If you go to, let's say, Citibank or some other bank, there is a lot of content which is not really dynamic, means there is no code, no Java code to execute. There are HTML pages on the website, there are images on the website, they don't change. They are always same. Probably they change very less frequently, once in 6 months or once in 1 year. Whereas a banking application, if you log in, that code is dynamic. Every time you perform an operation, the code has to be executed. The results are different. So whenever you are looking at the request, there are certain requests that are static requests. There are certain requests that are dynamic requests, which require code execution. Now the point here is, if it is static request, why to waste the power of application server? Or why do we let app server work on static content? Because HTML page or image is simply available on the hard disk. All that the server has to do is pick up that .html file, give it to the browser, assuming we are accessing it through a browser. So web servers are put in front of app servers. So web servers usually serve the static content, means if there is a HTML page, all that we have to do is send that, open up your browser, send a HTTP request to the web server first. A web server, let's say you are asking for a page a.html. A web server will simply look on the hard disk for a.html. If it is there, it will give you that page. If the page is not there, a.html on the hard disk, it will throw out a 404 error saying page cannot be found. Now if it is a dynamic request, means if let's say you're asking for a page, JSP page, Java server pages, then the web server will forward it to the app server, which is on on the backend. Now the app server will execute the Java code, give the output as appropriate. So web servers usually are for static content, and behind web servers are your app servers, which perform the code execution. They're basically for dynamic content. So the distinction between web server, app server is web server is for static content, app server is for dynamic content. This is a very basic definition. So if you look at this, the screen here, the three-tier architecture screen, we are looking at second and third tiers. Business layer or application layer, that's what is called tier 2. That's where the business logic gets executed, or that's where your application is actually available on top of an application server. And behind your business layer, you have a data layer where the databases reside, in which the actual customer data is available. Now if you see that list of servers here, you have iPlanet, that's a web server. Earlier it was from Sun Microsystems, now it is owned by Oracle. Sun Microsystems was taken over by Oracle in 2008 and 2009, I think. Then we have Apache web server, which is open source from Apache Foundation. Then you have IIS is a web server again, Internet Information Services this is from Microsoft. All these web servers do the same thing, static content, that's it. Alright, then you have recently the more popular one, IHS, no, not this one, sorry. IHS is from IBM. It's called IBM's HTTP server, that's why it's called IHS. Alright, so here it comes with WebSphere, and then you got Oracle HTTP server. This is OHS. This is what you will see with all the Fusion middleware nowadays. Oracle HTTP server is actually built on top of Apache web server. So the configuration, the features, everything of Oracle HTTP server are similar to Apache but better. Oracle HTTP server is much better than the core Apache server. But nowadays it's easy because Apache is something that is known to everybody. So we will also be working on Apache. We will see how to install Apache, how to stop Apache server, and how to integrate Apache with WebLogic, because Apache and OHS are some of the most commonly integrated web servers with WebLogic. So we'll be working on that one also as we move forward. Then after the web servers, you got app servers, which are the one recently getting popular nowadays. It's too popular now, WebLogic. Now the next one, competing one, is WebSphere. It's from IBM. Then you got JBoss, which is from Red Hat. JBoss is also a very good one. It's a lightweight application server. It is not enterprise grade, means it may not provide all the services like WebLogic or WebSphere, but if you don't need all those services, not necessary that, because not all Java program requires all services, then a lot of companies will go for JBoss also. The JBoss is pretty fast in terms of startup shutdown performance, and it's easy to manage. So, and in your profile, usually if you know WebLogic, it's JBoss has not more than 4 or 5 concepts. It's really easy that once you know WebLogic, you can pick up anything in JBoss in one day. So that's one additional thing that you get added. And Glassfish is another server, open source app server. This is also managed by Oracle nowadays. It's Glassfish. Then Tomcat is another lightweight app server, just like JBoss. If let's say if you want to give out a Java program, just like a setup file, so what usually you do is you keep your file size very low. In that case, you will require an app server which is less in size. Then you put your application on top of the app server and distribute it to the end users. And that's one scenario where you would like to go with Tomcat. It's a very small application server, lightweight, fast, with minimal services. It's called what you call fat-free application server, Tomcat. Usually you will see it when there is a Java program being distributed as a setup file something. which will internally have a Tomcat server, and on top of Tomcat server you will have the Java application running. So this is again a small one. So but for an enterprise grade, you will usually go with the top two, WebLogic and WebSphere, and the JBoss. These are the three things that you will see for an enterprise grade app server. Then you got on the data layer, I think here there's a problem here, presentation layer, there's a problem in the PPT. So let's make sure this is business layer. So in the data layer, if you come down here to the third column, you got Oracle. That's a database, most popular database for small transactions, not necessarily the warehouse. There are other databases for warehouse based DB. This is for OLTP. Oracle is probably the most popular one. Then you got Sybase, then DB2 is from IBM, then Teradata is from Teradata. I think it was recently acquired by somebody else, the Teradata is. Then SQL Server is from Microsoft. You got MySQL, which is open source. It's managed by Oracle. This is very popular with PHP programs. Then Pointbase is another database, again open source, managed by Oracle. Timestamp is an in-memory database. This is usually used for prepaid billing in most of the Asian countries. The reason is if you are doing a prepaid billing, your data has to reside in RAM, not on the hard disk. So that your data kind of, let's say, what is the balance in customer's account, that amount or that figure should be available in your RAM, and your application usually matches that figure with the amount of time you are talking, so that your billing gets, it looks like it's happening on the fly. This is used by most of the telecom clients who are operating in Asian countries, because most of the Asian countries the prepaid is more popular than Western countries. That's where your postpaid you will see. All Asian countries, like you have India, Pakistan, China, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore. This here you will see prepaid really popular. And so, I went to Indonesia once, and all of them, they are using 3-4 SIM cards. They said the average life of a SIM card is 10 days. They throw it out, literally, the customers. So it's prepaid. They cannot be, the companies cannot really give postpaid connections in there. Whereas in Western countries, North America, Europe, you will see most of the times prepaid. That's you don't really require a timestamp database in there. A timestamp is again managed by Oracle, so they make a lot of money on this timestamp database. Then we are looking at the operating systems. You got Sun Solaris. It's managed by Oracle now. Then you got IBM AX. HP has Unix operating system, HP UX. Then Linux is what we are using, getting popular nowadays, Red Hat. So Red Hat Linux is the first popular one. Now Oracle Linux is probably the next popular one. And all Oracle products, Oracle usually pushes their own Linux. So we are working on both those versions. We will be working on Red Hat Linux and Oracle Enterprise Linux. From a operational perspective, it does not really matter. They both are same. They are still Linux. But from a support perspective, if you are working with Red Hat, and if you are implementing Red Hat Linux, you'll be working with Red Hat company if you have to raise any requests or service requests kind of thing, or with your Oracle. Then you have Microsoft Windows operating system, a server-based operating system. It's not very popular, but there are some companies which will implement WebLogic on Windows. Like there are a lot of projects in Infosys. So if you are working in US Infosys, so you may be working on Windows of WebLogic. Otherwise, 99% of the times it's always Unix. And once you know Unix, Windows working is a kind of a cakewalk. So that should not be a problem. Then hardware, you got Sun servers. Obviously, the Sun servers are nowadays Oracle. IBM has its own servers. HP has its own servers. Dell has its servers. Now, the reason why we are talking about all these layers is we have some kind of link to that. It's always a combination like A, B, C, D. That's what you will be working on. Now we want to understand that combination. That's why we are looking at all this. So you'll be looking on a specific web
Hey
server.
Anil,
Yeah,
just the bottom of the screen is not completely visible. Not sure if it is
uh,
visible to Giri, but the hardware part
that's
is
it.
not visible to me.
You're able to see the IBM server.
Now I am able to, yes.
Okay. So
Thank
okay. So we're looking at a relationship here. Let's say if you see from the hardware, usually all the big contracts usually start with hardware. Now the IBM used to go to a company and they say, you buy the hardware from us, and then that's it. Right. So they got hardware, IBM servers, they got operating system, IBM AX, then they got IHS server. So here we are looking at the web server part. All right. Then they got a WebSphere app server. Then they got a database. So IBM used to say, you buy just the servers from us, we'll give you the operating system free. You can use our IHS web server, probably 1 or 2 years free of cost. Then we have a WebSphere that easily integrates with IHS. So you use it free for 5 years. Then DB2, you just pay a nominal license. We will manage everything, your entire IT infrastructure end-to-end. You just buy the servers from us. And that's used to be the argument that IBM used to put on, probably about 5-6 years ago. That's the reason even the vendors are really happy with this kind of approach, because if a company like, let's say, Walmart, they don't want to worry about the IT infrastructure. They want to outsource it to somebody who can manage or take care of things end to end. So if IBM comes to them and says, Walmart, look at us, we have everything, our own product, so our support is really good. I take care of your entire IT infrastructure. Any headache, it's mine. You have any problem anywhere, it's my headache. I'll fix it, I'll support you. You take care of selling the products. Don't worry about the IT infrastructure. So Walmart is happy to give the contract to IBM, because they have to worry about only one guy, IBM. Any problem, just put it on IBM's head, and they will be able to take care. Instead of buying Oracle database from Oracle, then buying a WebLogic server from BEA at that point, then putting another web server, buying servers from Sun. So instead of managing multiple vendors, it would be easy if it is IBM. So all the big contracts at that point of time used to go with IBM. So IBM used to get the whole contract of IT operations of a company. Then IBM used to outsource it. IBM was never actually doing anything. They are only interested in selling the product. 5-6 years before they sold the product, they outsourced it to all the small companies. Like they developed the outsourced development to somebody like TCS. The DBAs will be from some other company like Infosys. Then uh, application support will be from somebody else. So what they used to do is, they get the big chunk of the contract, they outsource it to smaller companies. So the big tier of companies used to be IBM, and then HP, and HP is one guy used to do that. At that point, Oracle had a disadvantage. Even though the database is good, Oracle, but they lack the other components, essentially the first two layers. So here if you see, WebLogic was not there. They had an application server called Oracle application server. They tried it, it failed. So they don't have anything in the presentation layer, and they essentially lack everything on operating system level. They don't have anything. Hardware, obviously, they are not strong. They don't know anything. So Oracle was strong only in database, and companies are not really willing to take Oracle database just because it's good. A company looks at overall the cost of doing it. Then Oracle started to think, because our application server failed, they started buying it instead of developing their own. That's when the first purchase came in, WebLogic. They bought BEA in 2008. That's when they bought BEA. When they bought BEA, they got WebLogic here, the most popular one. Now WebLogic and WebSphere together hold about 70% of application server market. About these, for both WebLogic and WebSphere, the numbers are almost equal, about 35% each they hold. 70% is held by these two application servers. Then when Oracle bought this WebLogic, they got probably another number one application server, especially in North America. In North America, you will see most of the times WebLogic being used. I don't know, for some reason. Their marketing is really hot in uh, North America. And then once they bought BA, they got WebLogic, and there's nothing on the presentation layer. Along with WebLogic, they got a lot of other things, Ecologic Service Bus and other stuff, which is nowadays being called OSB. The ALSB, what used to be with BA, is now OSB, Oracle Service Bus, which you will see in Fusion Middleware. Then what Oracle did was they started developing their OHS, Oracle HTTP server, and then they made a second purchase. That's the most important purchase. They bought Sun Microsystems. And when they bought Sun Microsystems, there was a big fight actually between Oracle and Yahoo. So Yahoo was bidding really high on Sun Microsystems. A lot of people thought, or it was true, like Yahoo is being supported by Microsoft on the background, so that Oracle could not buy Sun Microsystems, because Microsoft knows if Oracle buys Sun Microsystems, they will get everything. Now, after that, Oracle bought Sun Microsystems. See what they got. Here in this application layer, they got already WebLogic and OHS getting started on top of Apache. Now, after Sun Microsystems was bought, now they got Sun servers. Oracle is now having Sun servers. They got Sun Solaris operating system. Now Oracle has an operating system also. They got Oracle HTTP server, which is a web server. Obviously, you can always use Apache, and Sun Microsystems has another popular web server called iPlanet web server or Sun1 web server. You will see this one a lot of times along with Apache. So now Oracle has three web servers literally. They have their own web server, Oracle HTTP server. They have an open source web server, Apache web server, and the one they got from Sun Microsystems, iPlanet. Then WebLogic, which they already have, and Oracle database. They are really good with.
Anil,
Yes.
so Anil, Apache, Anil,
Yeah, go ahead.
Apache is owned by Oracle.
No, Apache is open source, managed by Apache Foundation. Apache is open source, managed by Apache Foundation. They have taken the Apache server. On top of Apache server, they have built Oracle HTTP server, the OHS. That's what we'll be seeing. This is what they built. So internally, OHS is nothing but Apache server. But Apache, if you ask me the question who is managing it, it's open source, managed by Apache Foundation.
Got it. Thank you.
So here, now Oracle is in a better or similar situation like what used to be for IBM. Now wherever the IBM goes, Oracle goes now with a similar or probably a better offer. Oracle says, I have a best database in the market, Oracle database. You just pay for the database. Don't pay for anything else. We have WebLogic. Alright, this is the easiest, that works best with Java program. And one more thing here, Java works better with WebLogic than WebSphere, because the code of WebLogic is much simpler. It's much buggy. So if you work on both these application servers, you will know, WebLogic is much easier to learn. It's much cleaner to manage, which means the cost of owning WebLogic is lesser than the cost of owning WebSphere, because it's easy to train the resources, easy to solve the problems. Alright, takes less time, so the number of less man hours, so less cost to the company. So WebLogic overall cost of ownership, that's what you call total cost of ownership, that's less. Then Oracle used to say, okay, so I got Oracle database, I got a WebLogic application server, I got 3 web servers. You choose anything you want. I got iPlanet. If you want, go ahead with this. Open source will support it. If you want a better one, you got OHS also. Then we have Sun Solaris operating system. This is probably one of the best operating system, most widely used operating systems. Sun Solaris. So we have Sun Solaris, then Sun servers. There was a time when Sun servers were cheap and best. HP used to have large boxes kind of things, but Sun servers were lean, they were powerful but less expensive. So a lot of people used to use the Sun server. So Oracle, once they have this package, they used to say you just pay for the database. The rest of the things we'll give free of cost for first 5 years or first 2 years or some other contract. Then Oracle has become the biggest competitor to IBM. Oracle started getting all the big contracts, and apart from the big contracts, Oracle is much aggressive in a lot of other areas. Like they got a lot of what you call point of sale applications, POS application. Like let's say you have Nokia showroom or AT&T showroom, let's say in US. Whenever you walk into a AT&T showroom, they will be using, it's called a point of sale. Basically, that's where the sale happens. Now, when a sale is happening, the center or the service center has to connect to the warehouse to see what's the inventory levels we have, or what are the things happening in our overall inventory. Now, they are going to use a POS kind of application, point of sale application. Now in that segment, Oracle is really strong. Means they have some applications which are used by probably almost anybody in US, any grocery store, or let's say Walmart or Staples, or AT&T or Cricket. If you walk into any of those stores, the POS application is most likely going to be from Oracle. So they are very strong. One, because they are strong in presentation layer also. That's what we are talking about. And the presentation layer, they are strong. Now they are coming up with this business layer and data layer package. So the companies are now moving more towards Oracle. It's because Oracle takes care of the entire headache. The company doesn't have to really worry about any product or any component at all. That's when IBM started losing business. When they started losing business, they have started what is called managed services division. The managed services division, they said, okay, don't buy all our components. All right, you don't have to really buy IBM AIX. You implement Sun Solaris, we will still support it. Or you implement WebLogic, no need to buy WebSphere, we will still support it. So whatever big contracts they have, IBM, when they started migrating to other components like iPlanet or WebLogic, IBM still started giving support. Otherwise, IBM never used to support other products. They always said, use our product or don't, go. We don't support. That's what the way they used to. But after Oracle started with these two acquisitions, Oracle started getting all the projects, and that's when their business, because of the business compulsion, they started supporting other components, especially WebLogic. That's the reason you will see nowadays IBM is the biggest, probably the biggest recruiter for WebLogic. Many of the projects that IBM has, they are either migrating or the newly acquired projects are implementing WebLogic. Then IBM recruits WebLogic guys. IBM now supports pretty much. There is a separate division in IBM which is called Managed Services. They support practically any product nowadays. And that's how Oracle has got practically everything in your IT layer. Your presentation layer, your business layer, your data layer, and operating system, hardware. They got everything in every product. We are simply listing only probably 2 or 3% of Oracle components. You go to Oracle site, they got everything, literally. So now, this used to be the case where 10G. In 11G, what Oracle did was, there is 11G is a stack of products. It's not just WebLogic. It's called Fusion Middleware. So Fusion Middleware has a lot of components. Oracle SOA, Oracle Service Bus OSB, then OHS, Oracle HTTP server. Then there is a web center which will manage our blogs, forums, next anything that you will see online, the social networking sites, like that's managed by a product called Web Center. Like that, there are about 4 or 5 products, important products. All those products together is called middleware. Now those products are developed in Java, and if a product is developed in Java, it needs an application server to run it. That application server is WebLogic. So for all Fusion middleware products, if the Fusion middleware product is developed in Java, Oracle recommends that you use WebLogic. So in 11G, if somebody is asking for SOA, they need a WebLogic administrator, because SOA is a Java application deployed on WebLogic application server. The same way, OSB, Oracle Service Bus, again a Java application deployed onto WebLogic. Then Web Center, another Java application, part of Fusion middleware, deployed onto WebLogic. So all Fusion middleware products, most of them, if they are Java, they are deployed on WebLogic. Something like which is non-Java, if you see Oracle HTTP server, it's written in C, because that's developed on top of Apache. Apache is mainly in C. So there is no Java in OHS, so OHS does not require WebLogic, but it integrates with WebLogic. Means OHS will be the web server in the front end, and the back end WebLogic will be there. So you will see OHS and SOA, let's say. So OHS is in the front end, SOA is the Java application deployed to WebLogic. So nowadays you will see most of the requirement, especially for Fusion middleware requirement, the internal thing is you should know WebLogic. WebLogic administration is really important, and the good thing is Oracle is really good at marketing. So all that you have to do is ride the wave along with them. Your career will blast, and probably the next 5 years it's going to be really huge for WebLogic. Everybody is going to move into Fusion middleware. All SOA is really hot nowadays. SOA, OSB, those things. So Oracle is in probably a similar situation, or in much better situation than IBM. They provide all these things. Alright, so that's where your WebLogic server fits in, and you will be working on one of these combinations very likely. See this one. You may be working on Sun servers with a Solaris operating system or Linux operating systems. That's what you will be working on. Then you may have OHS, Apache or iPlanet, one of the 3 web servers you will be working on. Then you have WebLogic here. Along with WebLogic, most of the times, or at least not sometimes, you will see JBoss also. So your team will be supporting WebLogic and JBoss together. JBoss support is pretty simple once you know WebLogic, so you will pick it up on your own. Then on the back end you will see a Oracle rack. That's a combination you will see in most of the WebLogic projects. So you will have Sun servers with Solaris operating system or Linux operating system. And nowadays you have Oracle Enterprise Linux, OEL operating system also here. I didn't put that one here. So OEL is also another possibility you might. Then you'll be working on OHS, iPlanet or Apache with WebLogic and Oracle. That's a combination that you'll be working on, the combo. Alright, so that's your general idea of what are the various commercial products you will be working together, and all these things. Yeah. Yes.
Before, when we had this ALSB, okay, and we had, say, WLI before, right?
WebLogic integration.
Right. So is it that the ALSB is a complete software in itself, or it would need WLI to be installed first?
Yes, it requires ALSB is a separate software. WLI has been discarded, it's not there anymore. ALSB is a complete one which requires only WebLogic, not the integration part.
So what I was asking is that because I have this situation, that's why I'm asking that ALSB is there. So if ALSB is installed, it can be installed by itself. It does not need any software below it to be installed. Is that right?
It requires WebLogic.
Oh, it does?
Yes, ALSB requires WebLogic.
Oh, so ALSB cannot be existing by itself. And now, if we see in today's world, it is the OSB.
That's right.
Right? Or
right.
This is what it is. And again, it needs WLS to sit on top of.
That's right. That's right. Okay. That's the reason WebLogic is is going to be so popular. It requires everything. Requires WebLogic. OSB requires WebLogic. SOA requires WebLogic. Or any custom Java application you are developing probably requires WebLogic. That's a good
And
thing
can
in
I
the
say
current
that,
situation.
and
Yeah.
then, and then can I say that Oracle application server in the old days where it used to be 10.1.1, 1.2 and 1.3,
Mhm.
they are also now are encapsulated within the WLS?
No, that's been discarded kind of. You will see only forms and reports with OAS or Oracle Application Server. They are going to stop supporting it soon. WebLogic is
Or
a official Oracle Application Server from now onwards, and
so
WebLogic has nothing to do with Oracle Application Server.
okay, so Oracle form and report cannot run on WLS.
No, WebLogic
Okay.
itself has another forms and reports. Nowadays, that's getting developed. They have changed that internal engine. Earlier, it used to be Log4j engine. Now it's internal WebLogic engine. So, if you are implementing forms and reports, either you can choose Oracle Application Server, which was
Okay.
original one, or you can choose WebLogic Server, which now is recommended one.
So if I
So
use the
now
WebLogic server, then
uh,
what forms and reports are called as?
it's called WebLogic Forms and Reports, part of Fusion middleware.
I see. And those may be HTML based or something different, right?
That's right.
Okay. Okay. I think I got my answer. Thank you. Thank you.
Alright, so that's where your application server fits in, and you as a WebLogic administrator will be basically responsible for making sure this entire things are integrated. So your work majorly lies in WebLogic. There'll be backend database team will be working on Oracle database. You will also integrate OHS server or your Apache server with WebLogic, and you will be working on Linux and Sun Solaris servers or some other servers, or depending on your project and customer. Alright, that's your introduction of your application server. I hope you got an idea of what we are actually working on, what's happening around us. Right now, what we'll be doing is the installation of this application server 10300. This is 10G, and as part of our sessions, we will upgrade it to 11G. So you will have an idea of what is 10G and what is also 11G. There are not many differences. It's only in terms of the way it's designed. A design is a little bit different, and some internal support is different. Other than that, WebLogic 10G, 11G are pretty much same from an administrative perspective. But just because we are here, so we'll be working on both of them. We will also see an upgrade process, which is part of our session. So we'll see how to upgrade WebLogic at once. Halfway we will see upgrade. So first half we'll be working on 10G. The second half of our sessions will be working on 11G of WebLogic. That way you will have practice on both. It's
Anil,
not.
when you say
Uh-huh.
so, Anil, when you say 10G, do you mean 1030 or do you mean 1036?
10300 is 10G. Anything after 10300 is 11G. Let's say if you see 1031 here, that's
Uh-huh.
11G.
Oh,
So
it's very confusing,
1031,
eh?
it's really that, because that's when Oracle started changing from BA to Oracle. They really messed it up. So you will see here 1031, 1032, 3, 4, 5, 6 currently.
This is the
1036
latest one, right?
is the latest WebLogic version, which is part of our Fusion middleware 11G. So
No. Okay, okay. Help me understand here. Just now you were using the word Fusion middleware,
mhm,
and I thought that when you say Fusion middleware, you meant those components like SOA, OSB,
right,
or OHS, etc.
right,
Right? So
right.
those are the Fusion middleware. But the WLS itself, even if it is 1036, it is
Mhm.
not Fusion middleware. It is still WLS. Is that right or not?
That's right. That's right. So all the Fusion middleware uses this WebLogic, either 10.3.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are the
Right.
versions
So
used by Fusion middleware.
if anyone is uh, if anyone is using the word Fusion middleware, it does not, for sure, it does not mean WLS. It means things like OSB or SOA or OHS or that
Right,
center, etc. Right?
right. But
Yes,
but
again, it
they
is so
have to be.
confusing for me. The reason is, you know, I just don't get it. There are so many components.
That's right. That's right. When somebody says fusion middleware, they are talking about a specific product. But because the product has to be deployed on an app server, there is obviously implicit meaning that WebLogic is being used. Because if you say OSB, OSB requires WebLogic. So OSB is
Okay, I
part
got
of
it.
Fusion middleware, which is deployed on WebLogic. Now, if you ask OSB version, OSB is 11G. But what is the actual WebLogic version we are using? 10.3, probably 6, 10.3.6. So the versions of this is what you say. Version of the OSB is the version of Java application. Java application is using a WebLogic server with 10.3.6, let's say. That is 11G of WebLogic. So Fusion middleware is a components list of components that will use WebLogic server. And after 10.3.6, there is no 11 version of WebLogic. Remember that it's directly 12. So WebLogic has 10.3.0.0, which you are looking on the screen, which is 10G. Then it has 10.3.1, 10.3.2, 10.3.3, 4, and 5, 6. Those are all 11G of WebLogic. All right, that's what they have. Then means there is no WebLogic 11.0.0. That's what I mean. Then WebLogic 12 is there, which is the cloud computing release, released on April 1st of 2013. So that's latest WebLogic version 12. There is no 11.0 version of WebLogic. 10.3.6 is the highest WebLogic version, which is used with all Fusion middleware 11G components. All right, so you will get an hang of it once we keep talking about all this. All right, so this is the installation, and as we've seen it, this is the infrastructure we're going to use. So this is the Windows box we have, and if I have to connect to these two machines, let's say I want to connect to the Oracle Enterprise Linux server. So this is a PuTTY session that I'm going to work on to connect to any of these servers. My Oracle Enterprise Linux is running on box 6. So this is that box. If you are familiar with the SSH port, a default port is 22. I've changed the port for security reasons. So I'm using 59 port. So here you got username, password. I'll give you this username, password, and this is where you will be able to work. So this server is accessible outside. So I'll give you all those details how to access everything. We'll be working on the same server. So here, if you see your name, this is Oracle. This is Linux, a regular Linux. Then this is the server name, and the rest of things. And by the way, both of you are familiar with Unix, or you guys want me to go through Unix on one session? We'll be working on the basic commands that are required by WebLogic admins. Are you guys familiar with Unix? Deepak, you have worked on Unix?
Yeah, I'm okay. Pretty much most of it is fine.
Excellent. So, basic things are enough. We don't have to be admins, but basic things are enough. What about you, Giri?
Yeah, I'm new to Unix.
You're new to Unix. Okay. So we'll do one thing. We will take a separate, probably 1 hour session. Then once you get familiar with it, then we'll continue. So probably tomorrow, or once we finish with the installation, that's when we actually get into Unix part. So I'll take a 1 hour session on Unix so that you are familiar with the basic commands that we're going to use here. And Unix is pretty simple. Don't really have to worry about it. Its only thing is we never really used it. That's why we think it's difficult. It's not really difficult. It's a pretty very good operating system. So we'll be working on basic Unix commands. All right, and this is your working location. Usually you'll be working on home and code IT. Here, if you do a listing of the contents, you will see a directory called students directory. So here, all right. This is where all students will usually practice. Alright, each of them will have individual directories. You can create your own directory here. So here you will see a lot of students practicing nowadays. So you can create your own directory here and you can practice everything, and all the installation files, everything are on this box. You don't have to really download anything from your uh, your laptop or desktop. All the files required are here. In fact, all the SOA files required are also here. We have for SOA training. So if you go into WebLogic, cd into that location, so you have all the files required by WebLogic here, and this is the installer we are saying. This is WebLogic 10.3 for Linux 32-bit bin directory. So you will be working on this one. Alright. So a similar server is other server that is 5, but that thing is a virtual machine. So what you are looking at in this screen, I just want to give you a clear picture of what is how the infrastructure is. So this is Red Hat server. I think this is given 10, right? This is encode server 10. This is actually Oracle Enterprise Linux. This is not Red Hat server. Both are Oracle Enterprise Linux server. Sorry guys. I have a Red Hat server at my institute. So these here we have both Oracle Enterprise Linux. So one is a physical desktop. Here this is a physical desktop. So we are connected to the router. This one is a virtual server. So here I'm going to start up a virtual server, and I'm going to give you all the setup of the virtual server to you guys so that you can put it on your own box. So I'm going to create Oracle virtual box. So this is a software. I'll give you all the instructions how to install and all the software. If you see that software, you will be able to see. Alright, now here it has all virtual boxes. Now one of these virtual boxes is our Linux server. So I'm going to bring up that virtual box inside my Windows. So on my same laptop hardware I am running a Windows box, and on top of Windows box using a virtual software or virtual box software or I'm running a Linux machine. This is my Linux machine. So this is the second server that we are using. This is Red Hat. Red Hat that I've said in that diagram. And this will be given to you. This is about this is a complete machine we are running. So this is about 20 GB size, and all files I have to still upload them to the server. So once I upload them, so I'll give the link. So you have to download the entire files, all the 20 GB, and install that Oracle VM virtual box software and simply attach that box to that Oracle VM virtual box software. So you have all the setup ready on your box in 5 minutes, excluding the download. That is if you want this on your own laptop without internet connection. Otherwise, you don't really have to do anything. You just have the cloud server. Do everything you want.
Anil?
Yes. Yeah.
Anil?
Yeah. I can hear you.
Anil, virtual server on my machine. So you have some instructions for that, right?
Yeah, I'll give you all the instructions, how to download it, how to install it, how to configure everything.
Wonderful.
I'll send it after session. Everything is documented, so you will have screenshots, everything, step by step instructions.
Excellent. Thank you.
So this box is coming up.
Your voice is breaking.
My voice is breaking. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I think. Okay, I think it's because of the wireless thing. I'll try to fix it. Just bear with me for today. Probably I'll put a physical connection to my laptop. Is it the same for you? My voice is breaking even for you? Or is it just for Gary? If it's the same problem for both of you, then it's my problem.
It does sometimes, so that's why I have connected myself with the LAN and also I put myself on mute when I'm not talking so that I have least disturbance for you.
Okay, okay, okay. Cool. I'll try to fix that one. Probably, I think the wire is the problem. I'll take a wired connection in the next session. All right. So that's interesting. And I'll be sending all the instructions on how to download the entire clone, then how to install Oracle VM VirtualBox, and then how to bring it up and something. And for you, Giri, we'll be working on a Unix session after the installation. Installation is not really quite nice. So the next session, we will stop it here for today, so that you get a better and you will get ready with all the infrastructure. After this session, I'll be sending all the instructions of how to download that software from, how to do the installation, how to configure the VirtualBox, other stuff. All right. And in our session, we'll be starting with the installation. We'll go ahead and then jump into the architecture. Then we'll go in depth into the WebLogic administration part. Sounds good? Any questions, you can let me know.
So, Anil, how many days we will have classes and how long? So daily it is 5 days or 6 days a week?
It all depending on your comfortability and my availability. Most likely we'll be having your sessions will be having days so that we can finish in 15 to 20 days. It takes 20 sessions for with 2 hours each.
Your voice was...
So it takes minimum 4 hours. What's it, is it?
Okay, so 20 sessions of 2 hours each is what you said, right? So...
Right.
Okay. So...
So it takes 20 days.
We are closing now,
Or
right?
if we take breaks, yeah. If we break in between, so it's at least 20 days. If not, if we take breaks in between, or you guys are not available, I am not available because of a weekend commitment or something.
Yeah, that's fine. I
The
think
normal
basically
thing
what
is
we need
25
20
days.
sessions, not 20 days.
Yeah, 20 sessions, and we will try to finish the 20 sessions, not more than 5 breaks.
So let us keep it in, if that's the case, let us keep it Monday to Friday, 5 days a week. Is that okay with Giri and you?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Deepak, I'm okay, but voice is completely breaking from my end because some day.
We'll fix it. Don't
Okay
worry
for
about it. That's
5
only
days.
for today.
And one more thing, WebEx is better, Anil. Anil, and one more thing, you will cover only WebLogic administration, or
Which one?
you will cover only WebLogic administration in the same 20 classes and SY also.
No, SOA will take another 20 sessions.
Okay, but
Yes,
I'm new to
it will be
WebLogic
pure
because I'm
website.
expecting some minute level actually.
Which one? Sorry? You're
Completely new to WebLogic because so I need Unix also new to Unix, so I need a
that's
basic
fine. That's fine.
commands
We
from
will.
Unix. Is it possible in the
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, not in the same session. I will take a separate session. Probably tomorrow or day after tomorrow. I'll schedule a separate session. This one or before this one, and we will discuss about Unix only for you.
okay, okay. But the WebEx
Don't
is
worry.
better
Don't worry. Yeah.
because it's completely stopped.
Yes, yes.
Voice is
I got
completely
it already. This is
breaking.
really.
Painful.
Yes, I got this really. I'll get it fixed today. WebEx, I'm not really sure why it's not picking up, man. We'll start using WebEx from tomorrow session onwards. All right. Any other questions, guys? Okay, cool. So I'll do one thing. I'll stop it here for today, and I'll upload this video to the server, and I'll send you the link where you can download it. Does that sound good? disconnected I am. Guys, can you hear me? Deepak, can you hear me, Deepak?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I think Giri was disconnected. That's the thing for today, Deepak. So I'll upload that video, whatever way you're uploading it, and I'll send you the instructions on how to download it, and also the instructions on how to virtual box you're looking at, right? Where that virtual box is, and then
Sure.
how to download it and all that stuff. All right. So we'll meet at the same time, and
Wonderful.
if the link is changed, and I'll move ahead.
Sorry?
So we'll continue tomorrow then.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Right, Deepak. Yep. Thank you. Thanks very much.